I'm Robert Wagner, and I'm going to be talking to you a bit about overcoming the cybersecurity poverty line. Just a quick introduction. So Robert Wagner, Mr. Minion on the failing Twitters and whatever else might be trying to replace it. I've been an advisory CISO for quite a long time now, so that means I'm usually advising clients on their security programs, not so much working on my own company's security. I'm a founder for Hack for Kids. It's a charity that teaches kids about security, safety, and ethics. We're actually going to have a kids village here at the conference tomorrow, so if you brought your kids, they're going to have a great time. I'm a board member of the Chicago chapter of the ISSA, and as you can see, I love all things dogs and motorcycle, scuba as well. But that was my dog, can you see it? Yeah, that was my dog Rocket. He rode with me for 14 years and thought he was the fastest dog in the world. But getting on to this talk, and I wrote this talk for executives in particular. Do we have any execs actually in the audience? Awesome. Great to thank you for coming. And I wrote it because as many clients as I've worked with, I keep seeing, especially new to the industry or new in a managerial role, security leaders making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And I don't know why I did that. There we go. No. Percussive maintenance, perhaps? It is. Well, it's just a hard angle to get. It's on the... And it's on the little screen on the red box. So. There we go. All right. And what I've noticed is a lot of execs don't go to conferences like this, right? Where do they go? Like RSA, who remembers data connectors when it was around? Yeah, and what's wrong with those conferences? I mean, they're not the worst thing in the world, but there's one thing in particular that I noticed so you usually get on the list to go to those conferences for free the moment you sign up for like Security Magazine or Security Weekly or CISO magazine or something like that. Anybody been to one of those conferences before, data connector, stuff like that? Yeah, no? All right, so yes. So what did you hate about data connectors? Too
many vendors.
Yeah, exactly. It was almost all vendor talks. Now, some of the vendors I loved because they were great in that they gave usable information, and that was fantastic. But a lot of times they didn't, and it was just a pitch for their stuff, right? And that doesn't help anybody. It was only when I got to go to my first HackerCon that I was like, oh, shit, yeah, there's actually a lot of good information out there. But CISOs, other security leaders, often don't come to things like this, so they don't know the things that many of us know. So I wrote this for them. If you're super deep in InfoSec and you've had a lot of experience, you're not going to get a ton out of this talk. I do have a few gems in there, hopefully for everybody, but it is meant for those just starting off in their career. And it's because I think there's a better way for everything. And so I'm going to try and hopefully teach those folks that are just starting off for that. So I keyed in on the cybersecurity poverty line, which was a phrase coined by Wendy Nather. If you don't know Wendy Nather, you need to get to know Wendy Nather. Read her writings. She is just phenomenal. Are we still okay or no? Yeah. All right. Should I keep going or wait? Okay. Wendy Nather wrote about this back in 2010, and it was because she was realizing that while most of the large corporations out there at least had the budget to do security. There's a bunch of organizations that don't have enough budget to even do the basic hygiene of security. And that's ridiculous. They're fighting a losing war. It's not even possible to win. And while this talk isn't going to be able to be a silver bullet that will raise you above it, and you'll be fine, no problems at all, hopefully it will give you some ideas on how to sort of stitch together things until you can get perhaps more budget to even prove your point. And proving your point is important. Wendy breaks things down into 4 primary categories or hurdles why a lot of organizations are below that poverty line. It's not all just money. So money's certainly a big part of it. Getting the budget isn't always easy, especially at smaller organizations. But it's also things like not having the expertise, not having the capability. And by capability, she literally means not being able to actually do the implementation of whatever it is you're trying to do for whatever reason. Maybe you don't have control of the assets that need patching, for instance, or something along those lines. And really one of the big ones is influence. A lot of managers, senior leaders in InfoSec maybe came up through the technical ranks, and they don't really know how to communicate in terms of business that will get them the resources that they need. So we'll talk about that as well. But let's understand what impact this is having on small to medium enterprise in the first place. Attacks to small and medium enterprises make up about 46% of all attacks out there, and for good reason. They're easy targets, right? People have been moving in this direction for quite some time, especially as larger organizations get more and more hardened. They're finding it's easy enough to get what they need out of going for small to medium enterprise, so that's become the target. And while that breach may cost them an average of $200,000, which for a large organization isn't that big of a deal, it's a rounding error, right? It causes 60% of the victims out there to go out of business. I think only COVID's been worse on putting people out of business, right, over the last couple of years. So this is a serious problem. So in an effort to fix things, you know, we always look at our great trial. Who here hates this diagram? I hate this diagram, right? Yeah, so way overused, but I bring it up because it's important. And I hate it, by the way, because it never frickin' looks like this, right? We never have this wonderfully balanced Venn diagram. Instead, it looks like this in most organizations, right? That's usually the answer that most small companies go, well, we'll just buy a widget, we'll buy a blinky box, whatever. And unfortunately, when you only focus on technology, a Mickey Mouse organization is really what you're going to end up with. So we're going to try to avoid that. I'll have some technical tips as well, but we're going to start with people. It is the most important place to start, and there's a lot of things that can be done here, right? So the first big problem that most small orgs complain about is talent is really hard to find. Is it really, though? Let's talk about ways that we can get around this mindset of talent is hard to find. One of the first ways is not every small org needs a full-fledged CISO, but they may need someone with a little bit of knowledge, some leadership skills, and the ability to talk business to get things communicated correctly and to even understand the whole compliance landscape, right? A lot of companies that have to deal with compliance that don't have a good leader take the wrong approach to compliance. Every audit is a negotiation. That is the first thing you need to learn when you're doing compliance, when you're having to answer compliance auditors, is everything is a negotiation, everything. And a good leader will understand what things can be negotiated, what things are more set in stone, and be able to deal with an auditor. And you know, if you've seen a lot of auditors, they're just trying to get the boxes checked off, right? A lot of them don't even understand why it is that you have to comply with the thing that they're saying you have to comply with. It's just they know that they're supposed to do it. If you can come back with a good argument saying, well, I've got some mitigating controls, let me show you them. A lot of auditors, if you explain it to them well enough, will relent and change their tune to allow for mitigating controls. But an inexperienced InfoSec team, and a lot of times an inexperienced InfoTech team really means IT people that have been tasked with doing the security stuff, right? Yeah, you've got a lot of IT people at small manufacturing firms who've been told, we need to be compliant, we need to be secure. Can you do that too? Because they have lots of free time, as we all know, right? So what you want to look for in a virtual CISO, first of all, they need to speak in business terms, and the first thing they need to know in business terms is how your business works. If they show an aptitude for that, if that's some of the first questions they're asking when you're interviewing them, you're on a good path. But they should also have some experience with incident response. In particular, cybersecurity in general, but that goes without saying, right? They should understand compliance, and then they need to create realistic objectives and vulnerability objectives, because we all know vulnerability patching is the bane of our existence. You can't patch everything, but you can patch what's important, right? And a good leader will be able to kind of weed through things and go, okay, I see what's going on here, I see what's important to the business, let's target that first. And we'll talk a little bit about vulnerability. But the second thing you need, so get a good leader in place. It doesn't need to be a virtual CISO. It can be a manager, it can be an IT manager, whatever it is. But you need to have a manager that's going to be very strategic. They need to focus on empathy and mentorship. And by the way, the reason I say stop chasing unicorns is because at that level, first of all, you probably can't afford the unicorn. But just as importantly, how many unicorns do you know that are complete assholes, right? I mean, they know their shit, but do they cooperate with anybody? No. Do they even mentor anybody? No, they'd rather not. Sometimes it's not because they may be neurodivergent too, and then they're not an asshole. They just don't know how to play the other reindeer games, right? But for whatever reason, they're not really up on the kind of mentorship that you need in a small team. And this is key. I knew a small office, a large office supply company here in Chicago that had an InfoSec team of 6 people, right? They had a great leader, and that leader saw it as his job to lift his people up more than he lifted himself up, right? He made sure that his team looked awesome. And then encourage that team to sharpen each other. Steel sharpens steel. This team did nothing but show each other how to hack, how to write code, how to automate, how to create rules. And they did it with such joy because their boss made their job so easy. They didn't have to worry about negotiating all the political bullshit that you have to in business, right? He made sure that his team was seen as valuable, and they got to do so much there, right? I mean, literally to the point of one guy was so good at coding that he wrote his own sort of ring zero piece of code for the point of sales things to fool malware when malware got in a situation, give it the wrong registry addresses so that malware couldn't affect the point of sale devices. So freaking clever. Now, he was a bit of a unicorn, but he was the kind of unicorn that showed all of his peers what he was doing, and it was fantastic. So with a couple of good leaders, good empathetic leaders in place, you then create an army of folks that you can afford, right? So that could be interns, it could be temp to hires, great ways to get started because what you're looking for is not a laundry list of all these technical skills. I mean, how many of us are sick of seeing job recs right now that are like, oh yeah, you need like 20 years of experience in a tech that only started 3 years ago, right? It's ridiculous. It's a big problem because HR people don't understand what the InfoSec people are asking for, so they write these job recs that are just freaking ridiculous. What you're looking for are people that are eager, that want to dive into something and have a bit of that aptitude to do security. With an intern or attempt to hire, you're going to know pretty quick whether or not they're the kind of folks that really want to play in this sort of specialized way that I'm describing. And then we just need more entry-level positions. There is a ton of people out there looking for InfoSec jobs. They are good, talented people. I meet them in the community all the time, but they can't get that first frickin' job to get started. So as a small and medium enterprise, you're in the perfect position to hire entry-level positions and train them up. You're going to nurture them. Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. So nurturing talent from inside and from without. So from without, right, these are these new people you're bringing in. But you need to create this culture of mentorship and sharing that I just described with that one team. And by the way, that one team of 6 people, when they merged with another office supply organization that had over 30 InfoSec people who did not collaborate in this way, who were basically just push button, they were the MCSE equivalent of like InfoSec people, right? They knew how to run this tool or that tool, but they never really dug into anything any deeper the way this other smaller team did. And they outperformed that team by a factor of 10, at least. It was amazing what that collaborative team could do. Now, one of the biggest complaints that I hear from a lot of organizations is if I train them up, they're gonna leave. Yeah, that's fucking right. They're gonna leave. Your job as a leader is to treat them so well that they stay. You're still gonna lose some anyway, but what you're gonna do is you're gonna find a couple of team leads in that thing that they'll be your hinge pins, right? Make sure that they're gonna stick around. You're gonna lose some people. You're a small to medium enterprise. Just fucking deal with it, right? Because at the end of the day, if you kind of keep this cycle of new talent coming in, you'll find some people that want to stick around. You'll find some people that will probably become unicorns, and they'll be paid a shit ton of money to go work somewhere else, and that's okay. You got what you needed and by the way, what you're feeding back to the community is priceless. One of your biggest jobs with them is going to be to do what that one manager told you is to justify things to the business, and that's going to include that training, right? A lot of tech people just don't know how to communicate their need and desire for training in business terms that make sense. You know what does? ChatGPT. I had actually gone to SchmooCon, and I'd found several friends that were like, my boss is asking me for justification to come to a HackerCon. They'll send me to RSA, and it's no problem, but I need to write justification for, for justification to go to a HackerCon. So I'm like, I should be able to help you with that. And then it went, They both got to go to HackerCons based on the ChatGPT. Yeah, it was easy peasy. So if ChatGPT can do it, as a leader, you better be able to fucking do it, because these people need you so badly. And they just don't know how to communicate. So what do you think the first conference I ever went to was? Hacker conference I went to was? Take a guess. Anybody, shout it out. Yeah, right. That's what I wanted it to be. I was a brand new SOC analyst, third shift. I went to my boss and I'm like, boss, I really want to learn more. Can't go to DEF CON. My boss said, what's that? And I said, it's a hacker conference in Las Vegas. It's so fucking cool. It's amazing. Denied. So I was frustrated. I'm like, well, I got to get something. And one of my friends said, hey, you should go to SchmooCon. I heard about it last year. It's really cool. It was SchmooCon 3, so you could still get tickets, right? And I went, boss, can I go to SchmooCon for training? Can I spend my training for SchmooCon? He's like, what's that? I'm like, it is an information security conference in Washington, D.C. It's quite good. Approved. I mean, almost instantly, right? I had to learn the hard way. And by the way, my boss was great. He just kind of didn't know that space that well. Once they actually, I was working for a large bank at the time, and once they saw how much better the team was by going to things like that, they got it and they supported us, but I kind of had to break the mold first and get us there. But at this point, your analysts, your first tier folks, they shouldn't have to figure that stuff out for themselves. That's part of your job as a leader, is to show them how to put their value in terms the business can understand. And then there's also, not only do you need to encourage, you need to enable your folks to take part in the InfoSec community. As an ISSA board member, I've asked many people in my community, hey, why don't you ever come to ISSA? And most of the time, especially if they're newer in their career, they're like, well, it's at 3 p.m. My boss won't let me leave at 3 p.m. to go to an InfoSec meetup, which is just freaking ridiculous, right? So allowing them to participate in the community, and it's critical. I've been a blue teamer all my life. I go to regular meetups in Chicago where I know a lot of red teamers. And for the price of a beer, I've become a better defender. And by the way, all my red teamer friends are bored out of their freaking minds because they pretty much get, they fish their way in, they've got domain admin in a couple hours, maybe a day or two. It's the same story. They're bored out of their minds. But because I get to actually hear about the tactics and techniques they're using to get in, I'm a better defender and I can advise other people on their defense as well. And then last but not least, don't be afraid to look for talent. I know some companies get a little sore when you steal an IT person to come work for the security team, but those employees are probably one of your most valuable assets. They already know the architecture, they know the systems. Recruiting a couple of those folks over to the dark side, we have cookies here in InfoSec, right? Recruiting a couple of those people over is another, again, quick way to get some quick wins if you're trying to build a security team up as a first-time security leader. And then the other thing you need to do is you need to fucking figure out how to leverage diversity hiring, right? There are so many people, both at the leadership tier that you could be recruiting, but as entry-level analysts as well, and we're doing a really bad job in diversity hiring right now, right? So investing a little bit of money into some diversity hiring training would be great. And part of that's going to be learning stupid-ass things in language that we all do, that a lot of job rec writers do. To find out that things like self-reliant or lead in your verbiage just is coded to signal masculinity, to sort of make women feel like this isn't the job for them, isn't obvious. You don't understand this when it's been part of your language for a long time. Words like energetic can deter older people, which if you can get someone who's got some experience but is looking to maybe head towards their retirement and take it easy the last couple of years of their career, you're denying them even the thought of applying for the job. And when it comes to applying for jobs too, that laundry list that I talked about of all those requirements is really holding women back in a serious way. Statistically, men will apply for a job if they think they've got about 60% of the requirements on that laundry list. Women will wait until they find one where they fill 100% of the recs. Right? So we just got to get rid of those. Alyssa Miller gave a talk at B-Sides Rochester. Her suggestion was brilliant. These days, if you see the way a job rec is written, you usually get what you're going to be doing for the company, right? Maybe what your degree or something or minimum level of expertise should be. But then you get all these other things that you're supposed to be experienced in. She suggested just cutting that out. Get rid of that stuff. It's not. Who here doesn't know how to learn to use a new fucking tool, right? That's why we're good at what we do. We know how to go, oh, this is a new tool. This is a new security scanner. Okay, yeah, okay, I see that. Oh, that's bullshit. Why'd they do that? And the rest of this is great, right? We know how to use tools. That's not what's important in your job hiring. So use specificity. Talk about what the job will be doing, not all the little things that you should have experience in that are just fucking ridiculous. Then do other smart things. Evaluate those resumes blind. Get a diverse panel, both in the reviewing and the processing and the interviewing process. And then have very structured interviews and scorecards. That means don't let people just wing it. Set them up so they're like, okay, these are the things I'm supposed to ask about, and this is how I score the things that I'm asking about. Give them the guidance. There's actually AI out there now to help with diversity hiring that will check your job descriptions and, if necessary, rewrite them for you to get rid of that language. Now, I was talking to a woman in the industry who was like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that. I don't want to give the hiring managers the easy way out, right? I don't want them to go, oh, the AI will write it and I'm still a jackass, right? So don't use it that way. Use the tool to inform yourself. Write a job rec, run it through the AI, and see the changes it made and understand why. That's a great way to really learn quickly how to adapt your language to diversity hire. And then also consider some non-traditional backgrounds. I have known some of the most amazing InfoSec practitioners I've known were also musicians, were also artists. The musicians ones actually made a lot of sense too, because music is math, right? Music is math and patterns. So it's not it's not too easy to understand why they may be really good at intrusion detection or reverse engineering. But a lot of hiring managers will see that kind of background instead of the traditional engineering, computer science background and go, oh yeah, well, what can they possibly bring to the table, right? But no, these folks are amazing. And you shouldn't be counting them out just because they don't have a traditional InfoSec background. And in fact, nannies too. So one of the most amazing practitioners in Chicago, she just got into the field after working as a nanny into her 30s. She's a freaking machine. Oh my God, I can't believe how good she is. And she's only got like 2 years of InfoSec experience at this point. Just amazing. So don't discount those hires. And there's other good reasons why too. So in business, we see lots of quick gains from diversity hires. Companies are doing better financially. 36%, outprofiting other companies by 36%. 19% higher innovation revenues. If they can do that for the business side of the business, wouldn't that fresh perspective do the exact same thing for the way we think about defending our own organizations? To help level those people up, though, here's some free resources, because we can't all afford to go to SANS, certainly not any, oh man, it's gotten really expensive, right? I mean, when I was going $4,000 or $5,000 for SANS, what's it up to now? What's the going rate at a lot of SANS classes? I've heard like 8,000. 6 to 8, yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, still, if you can afford it, still let them go. When I was working for the bank, people, the boss would be like, well, like 3 people can go this year and 3 people can go next year. So we'd all have to queue up for some of that training. It's good training, but in the interim, CISA has a really decent toolkit. Cyber Readiness Institute has whole courses laid out for medium-sized businesses to become cyber ready. SANS themselves have even given back to the community. Love SANS. And created a course, and it's geared again towards folks like vets, other underrepresented people in the industry, to kind of give them a leg up in the field. And then I don't need to tell most of the people in this room, but for anybody watching the recording, B-Sides is free, or like a nominal $20, and it's in almost every major city, except, Milwaukee, which already has an awesome conference. But you should be encouraging for the price of less than a SANS course, you can usually send your entire team to something like B-Sides, right? And then there's some awesome, actually really good vendor training out there. AWS's Security Essentials on how to secure AWS is really good. Investigating with Splunk, which I used to teach, is really good, if I do say that. No, it was really good. There's vendors that are putting together good training, Qualys certification training to get folks who may be doing vulnerability scanning for the first time. These are all valid classes that will teach you the stuff you need to get going, right? It's not going to make you into a unicorn, but it will get your team leveled up. I also want to introduce especially for small teams like this, the concept of a fusion SOC. So how do we usually, if you can afford to have a SOC at all, right? But if you have a SOC, how do we usually structure it? We've got tier 1, right? Those are the first level analysts. They're ripping through tickets, trying to get through as many as they can. They usually have over 100,000 in the queue, and they can get, how many can an analyst get to in one day? I think the average is like 10 where they actually have to do some investigation, right? If it's obviously a false positive or something, you can usually dismiss that quickly, but they can work about 10 real tickets a day, and they've got 100,000 in the queue. It's just ridiculous. So now there's strategies for paring down your queue too, but we're talking about the people at this point. So instead of having a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which does what to your tier 1 analysts, by the way? It burns them out, right? It makes them not want to stay, and we want them to stay. So instead of making tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, structure the jobs around tasks. Oh, I need you to investigate phishing stuff. Oh, I need you to do a little bit of threat hunting. Oh, I need you to do this. Let them get good at it, give them a few months, then rotate. have the person that was just doing it teach the next person, oh, this is what I do when a phishing ticket comes in, and then they get to learn something new, and they get to learn something new. This is a quick way to start leapfrogging your talent level as each analyst helps teach the next one. Having them present at conferences is another way to make them really good teachers too. So encourage them to submit for things like this as well. But as you rinse and repeat, you'll quickly see not only better analysts, but happier analysts. They won't be so burnt out working phishing tickets over and over and over again till they cry. And who's been there? I mean, who's actually had to have a job like that, right? Where it was just the same damn ticket every, pretty much day in and day out. It sucks. So then as far as their employees themselves, so we're still looking at stats of 45 employees still not receiving any sort of security training from their employer at all in this day and age. It's just ridiculous, and it's ridiculous because it's free these days. 62% don't know do enough security awareness training to actually receive then any benefits. So having someone watch that stupid frickin' security awareness video, right, that's so boring we'd rather rub glass in our eyes, is not enough. So not only do they have to have security training, but they need to get it regularly enough. And it doesn't have to always be the frickin' videos. If you're a security leader, if you're a leader in an organization at all, and you get one of those little text messages that says, hey, I'm in a meeting, and I really need you to go out and get some gift cards, and then how many have you gotten that text message? Yeah. If your employees haven't seen that yet, copy that and say, hey, we're talking about a small organization, right? Copy that and say, hey, folks, I just got this, and I want to show you what kind of things you should be on the lookout for. This is if you're not doing phishing on your own folks, at least show them when you're getting phished and say, this is the kind of stuff that's going out in the ether right now. Be on the lookout for it. So here's some free awareness training resources. And I'm so happy that Black Hills Information is here. So their Backdoors and Breaches is a free tabletop exercise, Dungeons and Dragons style, and in cards, and they're here. Like the decks are right across the hall. So go get them before they run out. But if you want to do some free tabletop exercises, you don't have time to create your own. This is fantastic. But there's more. So Amazon does their own security awareness training for their employees. They have made that training free on Amazon Prime. All of your employees can take free security awareness training directly from Amazon, and it's the same stuff they use for themselves. So, they didn't chintz on it. It's not bad. And, it's still not the most exciting. But how do you make security awareness training? I don't know. But it's quality. Google has similar. There's a mobile app-based one called EdApp. I think they have a freemium model, so you get so much free, and then if you want to start scaling it or something like that, it might cost you. Curricula has one. And then I love the idea of gamifying security awareness. So not only do we want to make security awareness more personal, and I highly suggest if you have people in-house that can do things like just teach people how to secure their own wireless router, do other little things like that, make it personal to them, they will pay much more attention to the other security awareness training that you're giving them. But if you can gamify the security awareness, even better. So there's a practitioner who goes by the handle Ben10. And Ben10 did a great video on this at DerbyCon, in 2014, 2012, somewhere around. If you Google Ben10, DerbyCon, and security awareness, you should find it. But he came with a brilliant idea for his small company. He said, hey, small company, all those videos that you've been seeing about security things that might happen? We're going to have a competition. And what's going to happen is you might see some of those security things that you're supposed to report or whatever around the company. The first person that reports any single one of those things gets a $10 gift certificate to Dunkin' Donuts. At the end of the week, I'm going to tally up all the points, and the leader is going to get a $200 Visa gift card. Oh my God, the way people reacted. By midweek, they're trash talking at the water cooler. Like, you're going down. I'm totally winning that. People were like reporting the CFO for walking through without their badge on, because that's a security issue. People were reporting strange black boxes outside the side door, because that's a security issue. It was a rodent control box, but still, they were actually reporting things that they thought were strange. And the best one happened 15 minutes after he announced the competition. He said, hey, how are we doing on time? He said, someone called him up and said, hey, Ben, I see one of the things. And he's like, what things? And she's like, I see one of those things you talked about, the competition, I got a thing. He's like, what are you seeing? And she said, well, this thing pops up on my computer every once in a while. It says, click here to authorize access or something like that. I clicked it, it's gone already. And he said, how long have you been seeing these? And she said, oh, like 6 months now. Yeah. So 15 minutes into the competition, they had a real security incident. He had turned his people into carbon-based intrusion detection systems, and it was beautiful. Now, I will warn you, I talked to one company who thought it was also a great idea, and they ran with it. They had people starting to download Nessus because they wanted to find more security things. And they started scanning their own networks. Now, the fact that they were able to download Nexus and run it in the organization is indicative of a bigger problem that we have to fix, right? I love the fact that they were so into it, and that was great. A little redirection. I'm a really good dog trainer, and redirection is very important. A little redirection of that energy into another space, and those folks will probably do a great job for him. To create this sort of healthy culture that I've been describing, here's a few things that are red flags or things you want to be checking as you're trying to create this culture. So security awareness and the training, it's never should be used as a punishment, never ever. Security awareness, that phishing stuff that you should do, people should be rewarded for doing the good things. They should never be punished for making a mistake. That's just freaking ridiculous. And it's also never applied fairly. If someone gets reprimanded or in some way punished for clicking on a phishing link, do you think they do that to the CEO? Ever? No CEO has ever been punished or humiliated for clicking on a phishing link without that person probably losing their job. So we need to have rules that get applied fairly, and if we're not going to do it to the CEO, and we shouldn't be doing it to the CEO, we also shouldn't be doing that for entry-level positions within the organization as well, right? Make sure everybody knows. In a small organization, we should be treating people, and they should realize that they are part of the security team. A small part, right? They're only contributing a little bit, but those little bits will help, and I've got a great example of how they can help coming up. Regular training and just figuring out what a risk is. Any one of us could be phished, right? You create a phish good enough, we could probably all fall for it under the right conditions. Maybe we've been drinking at CypherCon and we see an email, right? Whatever. The right conditions, the rightly worded phishing attempt could get just about anybody. But helping those who don't know InfoSec that well and making them an extended part of the team will pay off in spades. Asking for help when an employee doesn't really know what's going on with the security thing, asking for help regularly, whether it's your own security team, whether it's people in the organization, again, will pay off in spades. But they need to know that it's safe to ask that question. They need to know that they won't be laughed at or humiliated or, unicorned with our pompous unicorn attitude at the questions that they ask. And then make it fun and personal. I've already given some suggestions on you can do that. And one of the tips I get, so insider threat is pretty big for small companies, right? Most of them can't afford full-fledged threat intelligence. They're not going to be doing that kind of analysis. But one of the small company's greatest assets is that everybody knows each other. At a small company, if Bob in accounting has been changing his behavior a little bit. If he's always pissy, right? If he seems to be stressed out, you may even know that he's all of a sudden lost a huge amount of money and has a gambling debt or something like that. That's a risk until it turns into an insider threat. So our job is to get around that and get ahead of it so that those folks don't turn into an insider threat. It's not foolproof, but so much can be countered just by knowing our people and having a safe way for people to go, hey, you know what, I think Bob in accounting is having some problems. Maybe we could get him some counseling, something like that, right? Make it safe so that people can come to you before it turns into an issue. But that's often one of the most effective ways that a small org can deal with insider threat. And you know, if you get kind of that intel too, you can also start checking things like logs. You can start checking to see when was the last time Bob, who's very disgruntled right now, had his account audited to see what he has access to. Because Bob wasn't always in accounting. Bob was in like 5 other, business units and has access to all the stuff that right now Bob doesn't need access to. So while you might not be able to fully audit every account, knowing that there's some accounts of some folks that may be a little unhappy or have other reasons that could potentially turn them into insider threat is a great way to at least cover the auditing that you should be doing. So let's talk a little bit about process. So the CIS 18, I almost said 20 again. I've known it as 20 forever. 18 critical controls. Everybody here familiar with the 18 critical controls? Yeah. So they've added a new feature that I think is pretty cool. They're calling them implementation groups, and they've done it because they realize that not every org can implement every group for every control. So these are essentially levels of maturity and guidance on how to get to stage 1 maturity, stage 2 maturity, and go up. So what that looks like is, so here's control number 1. And we see that those first 2 subcontrols of control number 1 will get you to implementation group 1, which is defined as basic security hygiene. This is like the minimum viable product for your security group. So at least try to get to those things. If you can mature beyond that, frickin' awesome. But we want to at least get to it. So for each control within the CIS 18 critical controls, this is something to now strive for, so you're not overwhelmed, so you're not stuck in analysis paralysis where you're like, oh my God, there's how many controls, subcontrols under control 1? I can't do all of this, I don't have the money to do all this. Well, maybe you can get the first or second one out of the way, and oh, by the way, psst, it's okay not to start with control 1, right? Control 1, everybody knows is important. Getting control of your assets is supreme. It will lead to good security. Who here has seen a perfectly done CMDB? Yeah, I've never seen one, never ever. It's nigh impossible. I've seen really good ones, right? But I've never seen anybody get perfect control over their assets. As we move to the cloud, theoretically, we should be able to, but for now, yeah, maybe not. What you may want to start with is controls, maybe control 9, maybe control 10. 9 and 10 are where most of the attacks that are hitting small organizations are dealing with, right? Email, web browsers, and malware itself. So maybe focusing on those controls first, and then maybe we try to get control of our assets under one. Sorry that cut that off, but really do a little bit of a threat analysis. And it's going to be this kind of threat analysis, but understanding where most orgs in your tier are getting hit should inform you on which controls maybe you're going to get started with first. And then we really need better ways to describe risk, right? So as hard as we try, this is usually what it looks like when we try and get in front of non-security people and describe the risk that's going on. We're like, oh my God, it's crazy. We're gonna die. And by the way, I just caught the stat today. So 40% of global risk and compliance decision makers are improvising risk management. What does that mean? It means they're making shit up pretty much as they go along, right? They're building the plane while they're flying it. They're taking wild-ass guesses at risk. And by the way, taking wild-ass guesses at risk is one of the biggest problems that we have in InfoSec right now. Who here is still using risk matrices? Risk matrices suck, right? This is the way we're taught to do this. But in several studies dating back to 2008, we see that risk matrices can be worse than useless. That's pretty damning. And the reason why they're worse than useless is because we're taking a wild-ass guess at what the risk might be, and then we're trying to somehow quantify that risk based on this wild-ass guess. So I got this info from Douglas Hubbard. He wrote a book called How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk. If you don't have grip around your risk, check him out. He's got amazing free tools. His risk is based on Monte Carlo simulations. So what he teaches in his book is to take those stupid matrix things and turn them into probability estimations. So it goes something like this. You go to your board and say, hey, what is your acceptance of risk of us losing $100,000 this year? And the org might go, okay, $100,000, maybe we can deal with that. We'll accept like up to 80, 90% probability of that happening. You're like, okay, good. How about if we lose $1 million? Fuck, no, maybe less than 20%. How about $10 million? Yeah, less than 1%. They have just told you now what their risk appetite is, and we tricked them into it. No, they're giving you hard numbers, and then he actually has a spreadsheet that will run the Monte Carlo simulations against the probabilities, and you don't need that much data to figure out the probabilities. He's got a couple of tools that will teach you how to be a better estimator in one day for free, but it's amazing how little data you need. So to be statistically relevant, how many data points do you think you need to be statistically relevant when making an estimation? It's only 9. Only 9 data points you need to become statistically relevant. It's really low. And if you don't have the data, like what's something you would think would be next to impossible to estimate? Most people usually say, oh, well, whether or not we'll be breached this year, right? Sounds like how could I possibly estimate that? With just a simple set of data from either from your own history or something like Veris, which has at least the data for your vertical, you can get a pretty good probability of your likelihood of being hit. Will it be perfect? No. Will you be able to tweak it over time? Abso-frickin-lutely. And when you do that, now you have the board's risk appetite, your inherent risk, and the residual risk. If you're saying to the board, hey, we need X amount of money to get to the acceptance that you said you would accept, the board either has to change their mind or they have to give you the money that you are estimating will reduce that risk, right? And if they don't, then it wasn't your fault, was it? You told them. So basic hygiene, I'm not going to run through this. Most of you know it. The most important thing about assessments, if you're going to do them, and you better be fucking doing them, is that they should, well, a risk assessment should precede the security assessment, but understand that they are one of your best bargaining tools. You should always do a risk or security assessment with your assessor with the intent of getting more budget. You want to prove that there's a frickin' problem. Don't just say, hey, find out if anything's wrong. Have some strategic goals. I need budget for this. I know it's fucked. So I'm going to use an assessor to actually prove my case. Use every assessment as a purple team. The assessor should be sitting in the room with your blue team, and they should be watching the attacks as they happen. So much can be learned on that money that you're already paying for that assessment. Pick the right frickin' box when you do an assessment. You know, people talk about opaque box, transparent box, and translucent box. A lot of inexperienced InfoSec leaders will go, oh, well, we're doing translucent box. Opaque box. We're not going to give you any information. You got to break in on your own. The only thing that tests is whether or not your assessor is good at what they do. It's not very helpful. Whereas if you go, hey, you know, we know people are getting out, there's some value to it. It's not completely useless. Testing your APIs that way is probably a good idea. But for the most part, you know people are going to get in, so give them the frickin' creds and let them go to town. They will be able to test the most vectors in the shortest period of time. So patch management, you can read it on the deck. Gorilla Trust. Zero Trust is not a freaking tool. It's a process. You can do some really good stuff with MFA. You gotta give it to everybody. It can't just be the admins and the execs. If there are people that aren't using MFA in the org, they will be found. The attacker will get domain admin like that. There's free and low-cost MFA out there for you. Do things like jump boxes and secure workstations. Real quick way to isolate those privileged tasks. Hire someone. Automation's not difficult. One of your interns can probably learn how to automate your processes really freaking quickly. With technology, so cloud services, we know some of the stuff that's good. I also advocate using chaos engineering as a defense. A lot of stuff is in cloud right now and can be spawned up quickly, so why not create some really solid, tight, hardened images and regularly rotate them even if you don't need to, even if the workload doesn't call for it, because then if it gets compromised, the attacker's now lost their foothold. So you've just replaced that workload space with a new Docker image or whatever it is, and rotate them in, not to the point where it hurts business flow, but to the point where you're frustrating attackers, at least in that space. Snipe IT has a free asset management tool, so I told you there'd be a little bit of free stuff out there. It works damn well, and if you host it locally, it's completely free. If you want to use their cloud service, that's when you start paying. Deception tactics are beautiful. Use deception tactics to get that budget money as well. Using things like a honey file or a honey account will usually turn up something, and then you can say, I told you so. We need more budget. We've already found someone lurking in our networks. If you want to talk to me afterwards about how some of these work, I'd be happy to explain the concept to you. And there's all the shit we learned. Thank you very much. Quick questions? Do they have time for questions? One question? Anybody got a question? Yes? Yeah, it's really bad. Okay. Oh, wow. Right on. Like all the people crying in the hallways because they no. Right. The cone of shame. Right. But for those you that can't hear, so she's saying that she works in an organization where that does happen, that people get punished for failing. Yeah. Oh, they have to go to security. Yeah, it's like going to driving school when when you got caught speeding. Yep. So that's tough. Obviously, we do know that they do need better security awareness. I think one way we could turn that around is to find ways to make that training fun so that it's not a punishment, right? The other way to approach this, to turn it on its head, is instead of punishing those people, start giving rewards to the people that don't fail the test, right? If you make it competitive enough, those people will probably go, well, I want to get that prize the next time. Not everybody will, right? There's always people that just, they won't play. Finding ways to make it not a punishment, but something to give them focus, or maybe even turn it into something that they will benefit from, right? Like maybe some of the security training to teach them how to secure their phone. How many people don't want to secure their phone, right? And that turns into maybe them being a little more open to the message. Questions? Yeah?
So you were mentioning secure terminal before. That you mean on site?
Right, yeah.
So how would you reconcile that with the fact that people are actively fighting returning to the office? They got so used to
Right. So a good secured VPN with a jump box on the end of that could be a great way to handle those privileged credentials. And maybe, I haven't looked into it, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't create something like that in the cloud too, with some sort of bastion host in the cloud that does that. There's probably a gotcha there that I'm not aware of, but that's what I'd look into at least. Yep, okay, and we got to cut it. So yeah, thank you all. I'll be around if you have questions.